Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This is the Private Investigator Experience, and this is our inaugural show. So we are extremely happy that you're here with us. We're excited about today's show. Our host is Phil Little. He's a private investigator with well over 50 years of experience. And my name is Wade Little. So let's get right into this. Dad, how are you?
I am doing great today, Wade. Yes, as you said, this is an exciting day for us. And we're excited that our viewers and listeners are joining with us on this first episode. Probably many of you have been like I have been. I've been encouraged to do a podcast, and I've been kind of slow to get it going, saying, I don't know how to do this. But I decided to jump into it, and we'll hopefully be getting better as we go along. But yes, I have over 50 years experience. And Wade sitting there next to me has 40, almost 40 years experience. So we're getting close to 100 years between us. And I own West Coast Detectives International, which is 101 years old this year. And Wade and I both, and the team at West Coast Detectives, have been working on thousands of cases over this last, almost 50 years since I've had West Coast Detectives. And we've worked on every type of case that you can think about. And we want to give you, the viewer and listener, opportunities to also see what kind of investigative skills you have. We're going to give you opportunities to get involved with us, be interactive, and we'll give situations that come up on cases. And before I tell you what I did in that, we'll give you an opportunity to respond to us via email. And now's a good time, Wade. We'll talk about subscribing. You could really help us if you subscribe and share this video and the podcast. We'd really appreciate that. And you can reach us on a dedicated email at Phil, P-H-I-L, and then P-I, for private investigator, at PI 777 at gmail.com. Or you could leave comments on the different podcasts or YouTube, and we'll get back to you. But we want to be able to have you involved in our show. And on the first show, I want to give you some background just so you know a little bit about us, who we are, how I arrived here at this place in my life and in the private investigative, international terrorism, and global security business.
Right. So this episode really is kind of West Coast Detectives Phil Little 101. It's getting the basics, understanding who you are and a little bit of who West Coast is and how we operate. And then we can go forward from there. And one of the things you talked about was the cases that we're going to talk about and kind of walk through with our viewers. And that's going to be exciting because, as you know, when we talk to people and they find out we're investigators, they kind of get excited. They think of TV shows that are out there and they're always interested in finding out the cases. And sometimes they even will talk about, wow, did you think about doing this or doing that? So that's what we want from you, the viewers. We want your input and participation.
Well, Wade, I started my life on the farm in Missouri, a farm boy. Grew up enjoying all the things of hard work. I didn't know how much it was going to help shape my life. I had a God-fearing parents, even though we're not a political show. We're not a Democrat, Republican, or independent. I'm an American, a veteran of both military, law enforcement, and intelligence service. I believe in our Constitution, and I believe that we, the people, if given the right information, no matter what our background or political persuasion might be, we will make the right decisions for the basic things of our lives. And I got that really put into my life with the discipline of farm life and hard work. As I advanced on down through my life, I got to almost 18 and the draft was still there then. And so I decided that I would go in the Air Force, and that opened up my life to all the different experiences that I hadn't had an opportunity to. But fortunately, the biblical view of that my parents had given me about respecting everyone, that no one is better than anyone else because of color of skin or background or wherever they come from. So I took that with me into the military, even though I discovered there's a lot of stuff going on out there in the world I had no idea about. Prejudices and different things that shape people's lives. But I realized that I had values and I worked hard to maintain those, even though there was different things pulling at me in life. So that's what propelled me. I guess the thing, why was that when I think about law enforcement, why I was interested in that, we had the Missouri State Troopers coming by all the time, and they had their guns over the door frames, and they had these pristine uniforms and these state trooper hats. And I said, that's what I want to do one day. So that kind of led me into the Air Force, and then out of the service, and into the next journey of my life.
Right. So you grew up on a farm. You had animals. You had a horse. I remember. I know that. That was one of your things you always talk about. And then from there, you had the influence of the troopers coming by. Then you went into the military. And then once you left the military, where were you at? Both, I guess, maybe as well in the country. Where were you living, and how did you take that military experience and your influences uh, to the next step in your life?
Well, I left the farm in Missouri and went to Texas, where I had the boot camp in the Air Force, which was real boot camp back then. We had all the weapons and other types of training that you would have in boot camp. And then when I was stationed out in George Air Force Base at that time, which is not existing anymore, I was introduced to California life. And so when I got out of the Air Force, I was there in Victorville. I think I was 22 years old when I got out, 21 or 22. And so I was looking around for something to do. And I started trying a bunch of different things. I went on the sheriff's department back then when it was before California Post even was in existence. And you raise your hand and took the oath to the Constitution, and you would protect it and serve it and make sure that you treated served the people right. And they gave you your badge, and then we were on the force and working. So I but as I started that, I realized there were other things I wanted to do in life also. So I had all these things running through my mind.
So how did you make that switch, going from military to becoming a private investigator? How'd that happen?
I'd been in law enforcement, I guess, about 8 or 9 years, 10 years, close to that. And I just started realizing that I wanted to be the boss. I wanted to lead. I wanted to be the sheriff. And I knew that would take a lot of time if it would ever happen. So one of my friends that had been on the California Highway Patrol had left the patrol and went into private investigation. And he explained to me about the licensing and how it worked. And when someone in my family said, why don't you just do something you'd really like to do? I just said, well, I'd become a private investigator. So it happened. I got my license. I started learning about the field a little bit. And then we moved down to Los Angeles, where I started this one man, Phil Little investigations, and then ultimately had 2 or 3 part-time guys working. And that propelled me into the rest of my life. I found that I loved it, private investigation. I quickly adapted to it. And I just loved helping people too. I
Right.
loved giving people answers to problems.
So what's the big difference between then and now in the investigative world?
Well, in those days, when I first started back in 1972, everything was done in the field. We didn't have the technology and the systems today that we as private investigators have. You had to go out and dig it all up. It was the old shoe leather, pounding on the streets, knocking on doors, asking questions, going to county offices to research for death and marriage and trying to find out other things about people, about their credit history and how they operated their lives. And that took times on a case, you would spend weeks just trying to get all this information. But today, we have 85, maybe 90% of that before we ever go out in the field. We have technology that we could put a name into, even without a date of birth and social security, which we generate pretty easily, and we'll have pages, 15, 20, 30 pages of background on a person in just a matter of 5 or 10 minutes. So it's given us tools to be more effective for our clients, help be more cost effective, as well as help us get accurate information. And for us then to be able, we made a commitment to our clients. And this is part of the philosophy and DNA at West Coast Detectives. We made sure we did everything we could to get the facts. And we didn't tell the client something that we didn't believe that we had done everything humanly possible to make sure it was true.
Right. And we always had a motto which you started and you learned: prevent, prevent, prevent. And so that takes place in making sure that we have all the information that we can give a client, so nothing is going to come back and say, well, why didn't you guys do this? Well, we've taken every step possible to get you the right information.
Yeah, some of the old timers in the business and in law enforcement and said, when you give a report to a client, don't leave a question unanswered. If you bring up a question, then answer it. So you give them an answer. So many times I heard from clients, they got reports from private investigators and they had all these questions, but they didn't have answers. So, and then for my Air Force days, I was in jet fighters and airplanes, and you didn't want to have one crash and lose a pilot. So everything was prevent, prevent, prevent. And then I have a kind of a little quirk about myself, I guess. I don't like to hear from a client saying, your guy's messed up. And I worked hard, and we all worked hard. I didn't have that happen very often, but that was one thing that drove me, trying to make sure that I'd answer the questions and the client knew everything I knew.
So it sounds like that drive is part of the reason that West Coast was so successful.
Yeah, that was a lot of it. It was also learning uh, from mentors, great people around me, old law enforcement people, police chief out in Buena Park that just drilled into me, build your intelligence file, start with intelligence, and someplace down the road, 5, 10, 15, or 20 years, they'll really be valuable. And then the other thing was one of my clients in San Fernando Valley, a law firm, Fred Gabler, he set me down and said, Phil, when you work a case and you finish it, if you haven't got a retainer up front, he said, then when you lay that report down, our office or anyone else get paid. So I learned how to get paid. And I found that many didn't do that. But then also the ethics. We tried to make sure that we used integrity and diligence and told the client the truth and never elaborated or tried to distort the facts in any way.
Right. So listen, as we're running out of time here, on our first inaugural show, let's jump ahead real quickly to your international work. And if you could just touch on that, and then the book you wrote also, which is heavy into your background and personal experience. Can you just touch on that?
Yes, I will. And this is Hostile Intent. And this was my first book, which came out of my search for terrorism, the source of it. This is a investigator's look. This book is more like a case file, and I uh, went along over. This happened over a few years in my search, and a lot of it was cases that happened along the way. But how all this started, I was in Israel and southern Lebanon with a group, a ministry that I was on the board of, and we were encouraged to go up to southern Lebanon and find out what was going on and how Christians were being slaughtered by the PLO. And we were encouraged that no one was helping them except the Jews. We should get involved. And that's what happened. I'm going to be talking about the events of this book. A lot of people think a lot of it's fiction, but this one is not fiction. It really happened. And I'll be walking through how I moved from a local private eye, which most private investigators work in their neighborhood or their community, their city, maybe a part of their state. But I was led to look out around the world when I discovered in that southern Lebanon and Israel that terrorism was going on. I just sensed that down the road that was going to affect us all over the world. So we'll be touching on that, dealing with that. We'll be walking through cases, and when we want you to be involved and help us build better lives for people. Our goal and what we want to do is be able to share uh, security tips that you could do easily. And a lot of them are common sense that we don't think about. One of them is about a situation that uh, I heard of some time ago, when I thought about it. And it was, let's say you're a victim of a car breakdown out in the middle of nowhere. You're a hiker that's been injured and you've fallen and you can't get out, get help. There's something that has caused you to be alone without help. You look at your phone and it is practically gone down, and you don't have really much. You maybe got one bar on it. So don't start first trying to get access to somebody to call them. First, go on your voicemail and leave everything about where you're at. Uh, Everything about if you're going to leave to try to go find a town or help, let people know so that if your phone does go down, they will still be able to hear your voicemail and they'll be able to pinpoint pretty close to where you're at to be able to get help to you. So that's just a simple tip. Remember, change that voicemail if you ever get trapped or in a dangerous situation that you don't know where help's going to come from that could save your life or that of a family member.
That's right. That's a great tip because many times we panic and we just forget about those things and we just want to try to get a hold of somebody. So that's a great tip. Thank you. So as we close today's show, first off, thank you to the viewers. Thank you for being with us. And again, subscribe, like the Private Investigator Experience, Phil Little, Private Investigator. Also, our email address, which we have for you to send us, contact us, ask us questions. You want to go ahead and give that?
Yeah. It's Phil, P-I, so the letters P-I, 777 at gmail.com. And then you can leave comments too that we'll be watching for.
Very good. All right. Closing thoughts.
Everyone, just have a safe rest of this week. We just had Independence Day, and that was awesome. Let's remember what that means and that each one of us need to make a difference in our country. So God bless America. God bless you, and have an awesome week. And till we see you again.
That's right. Thank you for watching the Private Investigator Experience. This has been your host, Phil Little. I am Wade Little, and we will see you next time.